In 1938, Mallard hit 126 miles per hour, the fastest steam locomotive on Earth. The London and Northeastern Railway was Britain's most celebrated, famed for the Flying Scotsman and streamlined engineering. Yet more than half its revenue depended on coal, steel, and shipbuilding, industries already in decline. How Britain's most famous railway became its most vulnerable does not begin on the footplate. It begins in the balance sheets. The London and Northeastern Railway emerged in 1923 from a forced union of 5 major companies: the Great Northern, Northeastern, Great Eastern, North British, and Great Central Railways. This merger, mandated by the Railways Act of 1921, created a vast network stretching from London King's Cross to Edinburgh Waverley, with branches fanning out to Hull, Newcastle, Leeds, Sheffield, and Aberdeen. The LNER's main artery, the East Coast Main Line, ran for nearly 400 miles, linking the capital to Scotland and passing through the industrial heartlands of Yorkshire and the Northeast. This corridor was more than just a route for fast expresses. It was the backbone for moving raw materials from the coalfields of Durham and Northumberland, the steelworks of Teesside, and the shipyards along the Tyne and the Clyde. At its birth, the LNER inherited 7,735 locomotives and over 20,000 goods wagons, making it the second largest engine fleet in Britain and the largest pool of freight wagons among the newly formed Big Four. The company's reach was not limited to the glamour of the Flying Scotsman or the record-breaking Mallard. Its tracks threaded through ports, docks, and industrial sidings, serving as the main conveyor belt for Britain's heavy industry. The geography of its network, spanning coalfields, steel towns, and export ports, meant that the LNER's fortunes would always be tied to the fate of the industries it served. The Grouping Act's clauses forced together regions with very different traffic patterns and economic bases, yet the new company's map was unmistakable. A backbone of express routes overlaid on a dense web of mineral and freight lines. This vast canvas set the stage for both the railway's public image and its hidden risks, shaping every decision about what and whom the LNER moved. The LNER's balance sheet told a far less glamorous story than its public image. More than 45% of its income depended on freight, a figure that hovered just below half through the interwar decades, according to the company's own annual reports and Board of Trade returns. This was not a diversified portfolio. The vast majority of that freight revenue came from 3 heavy industries: coal, steel, and shipbuilding materials. In 1923, coal alone accounted for nearly 70% of total freight tonnage, with steel and shipbuilding supplies making up most of the rest. By the late 1940s, coal's share slipped to about 55%, but the basic pattern held. The LNER's commercial arm was locked into long-term contracts with major industrial clients: Durham Collieries, British Steel Corporation, Clyde Shipbuilders, that guaranteed bulk volumes in exchange for discounted rates. These agreements, detailed in the Commercial Committee minutes of the 1930s, offered some stability in boom years but left the railway deeply exposed when demand faltered. The risk was not just in volumes, but in concentration. In 1935, coal alone generated 68% of all freight income, crossing what the Board of Trade called the safe threshold for revenue concentration. Internal audits flagged this as a structural weakness, warning that a downturn in any one sector could destabilize the entire company. The LNER responded with risk-adjusted pricing, raising rates when volumes dropped, offering rebates to steel producers for exceeding targets, but the underlying exposure remained. Even as the company sought to diversify into manufactured goods and agricultural produce, these new streams never matched the scale or profitability of bulk industrial freight. The result was a railway whose financial health was tied to the fortunes of Britain's heavy industry, leaving it vulnerable to external shocks that would soon test its resilience. Steam, speed, and spectacle defined the LNER's public face. At the heart of this image stood Sir Nigel Gresley, the company's chief mechanical engineer, whose vision shaped not only the locomotives but the very identity of the railway. Gresley's Pacifics, most famously the Flying Scotsman and the A4 class, captured imaginations with their sweeping lines and unprecedented performance. The A4s, with their streamlined casings and three-cylinder power, were built for the East Coast Main Line's long, flat stretches, a deliberate choice to make the LNER synonymous with modernity and national pride. In July 1938, the locomotive Mallard thundered down Stoke Bank, clocking 126 miles per hour, a world steam speed record that still stands. This achievement, widely reported in British Pathé newsreels and celebrated in the Railway magazine, was more than a technical feat. It was a statement the LNER could outpace rivals and embody the spirit of progress, even as economic headwinds gathered elsewhere. Posters, press releases, and even parliamentary debates fixated on the glamour of Mallard's run. For a moment, the LNER seemed invincible, its prestige fueled by the promise of speed and engineering excellence. Yet beneath the polished steel and record-breaking headlines, the company's commitment to spectacle came at a cost, one that would soon become impossible to ignore. Freight revenue on the LNER plunged between 1929 and 1935, falling by nearly a third according to Board of Trade tables, a blow that stunned even the most cautious directors. Coal and steel, the railway's financial pillars, shrank alongside the wider industrial collapse. In 1930, coal traffic alone dropped by over 1 million tons. Finance committee minutes reveal a board scrambling. Forecasts slashed, contracts with collieries and steelworks renegotiated on harsher terms, and urgent appeals for government relief. The crisis deepened as the Road Traffic Act of 1930, debated in Hansard and passed that July, changed the rules overnight. New licensing made it easier for haulage firms to operate, while lighter taxes and higher weight limits let trucks move heavier loads for less. By 1932, internal reports from the LNER warned that road competition was eroding short-haul and regional freight, routes once thought secure. Parliamentary records show directors lobbying for tighter controls, but the regulatory tide had turned. The board faced shrinking markets and a rival that played by new rules. Finance committee minutes from the mid-1930s reveal a board locked in debate over how to spend what little capital the LNER could raise. The allure of ever-faster steam locomotives continued to dominate the agenda. Between 1925 and 1938, nearly 35% of the company's capital expenditure went to new Pacifics, streamlined A4s, and upgrades for express services. Electrification of the East Coast Main Line, costed at £4.5 million in internal reports, was repeatedly sidelined as too speculative or beyond current means. Diesel trials received only token funding. The steam program, while delivering short-term boosts to ticket sales and headlines, left the railway with high fixed costs and a fleet dependent on cheap coal and intensive maintenance. Diversification efforts, though visible in the annual accounts, never rivaled the scale of the main business. The LNER held stakes in shipping lines, dock operations, and a handful of bus companies, but returns were modest. In 1937, subsidiary accounts show that non-rail ventures contributed less than 7% of total operating income. Directors debated further investments in road haulage and coastal shipping, but the sums involved were tiny compared to the outlay on steam. The board's decisions, shaped by prestige and the hope of short-term recovery, deepened the company's exposure just as Britain's heavy industries entered their most volatile era. On the first day of September 1939, the British government issued the Control of Railways Order, stripping the LNER and its rivals of operational autonomy. Overnight, the Ministry of War Transport dictated which trains ran, what cargo moved, and where every locomotive was sent. The board minutes of the LNER from that week show the abrupt shift. All timetables, freight priorities, and even maintenance schedules now answered to Whitehall. not York. Ministry orders rerouted express services, cut passenger frequencies, and forced the company to reserve the majority of its Pacifics for military or essential supply trains. Every wagon and engine was subject to central allocation. Coal, munitions, and food took precedence, while commercial contracts and luxury goods were pushed aside. The company's legendary express timetable shrank, and directors had no say over which routes survived. In a matter of days, the corporate control of the LNER vanished, replaced by a regime of traffic directives, quotas, and daily reports to the Railway Executive Committee. The railway that once embodied prestige and self-direction now moved at the command of the state. Bombs fell on the LNER network with relentless force. York's North Road engine shed was struck in October 1940, destroying a dozen Gressley Pacifics and 30 freight wagons in a single night. Hull docks, a vital link for coal exports, lost nearly half their wagon capacity in the summer of 1944, when a raid wiped out 45 coal wagons and crippled the main yard crane. Grantham's signal tower, hit in November 1941, brought express and freight traffic to a standstill, forcing trains to detour for days. Each attack left scars: collapsed bridges, gutted sheds, twisted rails. Maintenance teams worked around the clock. By 1945, nearly 40% of Pacific locomotives and almost half the wagon fleet were overdue for major inspection. Workshop logs recorded thousands of hours of emergency repairs, yet the backlog kept growing. For the railway's workforce, exhaustion became routine. Every missed inspection, every patched-up bridge pushed the LNER closer to the breaking point. Prestige alone cannot shield infrastructure from economic shifts. Today, transport networks still face similar pressures. Technology dazzles, but hidden dependencies decide survival. Britain's most iconic railway was not undone by a lack of vision, but by the risks we rarely see. The real vulnerability always travels beneath the surface.